Welcome to the show. We're so glad that you're here. My next guest, Dinkar Pujara, wrote a book called 108 Earthly Desires of a Dark Hearted Man. Dinkar, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Dinkar, what is the main message? What are you talking about with a book?
Well, two things. Number one uh, is a historical book in the sense recent history. 1990, when President Bush, the senior, he was in the White House,
Mm-hmm.
and the significance of 108 has significance in terms of mathematics, religion, and even astronomy. So, earthly desires are desires, but not necessarily divine desires. A human being can have desire each way, whatever the way a human being chooses.
Okay.
And that's the title of the book. A story about this man who is undercover agent for the Indian government agency
Mm-hmm.
RAW, that is Research Analysis Wing, that is equivalent to the CIA of this country.
Oh, okay. So it's really like a political thriller.
Yes,
Okay. But it has a little grain of truth.
yes, because the whole thing started. If your listeners know about Mr. Seymour Hersh, who is a very well-known investigative writer who won Pulitzer Prize for writing, he had written an article in 1994 in the New Yorker magazine about this historical event. Now, I read that in 1994 and it stuck with me that I'm going to write something about this because it was very intriguing that he had gotten this information, Mr. Hirsch, through the Freedom of Information Act. And in the article, he describes that going back to Mr. Reagan, President Reagan,
Mm-hmm.
and President Bush, they were helping Pakistan to develop nuclear weapons.
Okay.
However, there was a congressional act which was introduced by Senator Pressler of South Dakota that the administrations, both of them, had to certify the Congress every year that the help which was given to Pakistan was not going to be utilized to develop any mass destructive
Mm-hmm.
weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason Republican administrations did that was number one, that Pakistan was kind of a buffer between Russia, Soviet Union, and America, uh, and Pakistan had coordinated and helped Mr. Nixon, President Nixon, for his historic trip to China. And that's why America had always kind of taken Pakistan's side. It's called tilted towards Pakistan during this uh, conflict between India and Pakistan going back to 1947, where India obtained freedom from the British Empire.
Mm.
And at that time, India was a country, but during the freedom, the last viceroy of the British Empire, who was in India, suggested that India should be split because in India at that time Hindus were in majority, almost 80% of the population, and Muslims were in minority.
Okay.
So there was a partition between the country in 1947. So the majority of Muslims, which was in West Bengal area, was given to Pakistan, and also the northwest India, which is bordering Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was, the Pakistan had western part and eastern part, and India was in between.
Okay.
However, the conflict was, the northern India had the region called Kashmir, and both countries claimed that Kashmir should have been in their part of the deal.
Mm-hmm. They each wanted it. Yeah.
Right, and immediately following the partition, the conflict or war started, and the whole matter went to the United Nations. At that time, United Nations was like infant. It had started only a couple of years before that.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And historically, United States took Pakistan's side because India was considered at the time under Soviet umbrella.
Okay.
Even though India was not one of Soviet satellite countries like Poland and Romania and Czechoslovakia, but India's
They got that
leaders
label. Mm-hmm.
were leaning towards socialism.
Right. Right. So basically,
So
what you're saying though is that this book really talks about how far international leaders, not just the political, but also the military, will go to influence their powers over other countries. Is that kind of the bottom line? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean,
And
you're
this
talking
has
about.
been happening for the
I'm
whole
sorry.
century, or going back to 2,000 years, from Roman Empire to
Wow.
Ottoman Empire, and the things which went from Christianity to, like, there was a jihad and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But you are right that the big powers were interested in keeping, after the Second World War, okay, immediately after Second World War, the Cold War started between Soviet bloc, called Warsaw Pact, and American allies. Okay.
Okay.
So that's where the conflict started.
Gotcha. Dinkar, let's talk about how the intelligence agencies have really shaped the world's heritage. I mean, it's that based on this book, you're saying the intelligence agencies have a lot of influence that maybe we're not so aware of.
Yes, because, for instance, by definition, let's take America. By definition, CIA is not authorized to operate within the country. That is FBI's job.
Okay.
So whatever CIA did and influence was outside of this country. And it was the CIA's responsibility to make sure that the Warsaw Pact country and NATO countries, stay at bay and protect democracy in Germany. At that time, it was West Germany, because East Germany was under Soviet umbrella. So this is how CIA operated. However, CIA's counterpart, KGB, was more influential because they were sort of ruthless and dominated these 8 satellite countries. Actually, there were about 15 of them, and it was called the Soviet Empire. And the small countries like India, Pakistan, Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, they were caught in between these big powers. The American people, even now, nobody exactly knows how many employees CIA has or what is
Mm.
their budget. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it is rumored that even the president doesn't know.
Wow.
And, and the president is not supposed to know because president cannot authorize any assassination of foreign leaders. He would be impeached directly.
Mm-hmm.
However, they were leaders were killed from Argentina, Chile, and everywhere based on CIA's influence and encouragement to the so-called Second Army, which were paid money. So
Wow.
that's the influence they had. But
Okay.
between the two, KGB was always more powerful because Russia, I mean Soviet Union, did not have any control, or since it was not a democratic country,
Mm-hmm.
the KGB did not report to anybody but the Soviet secretary of the party and Stalin, and they had free hand. It was not bound like the CIA was. However, CIA also found ways to do business,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the reasons CIA was more concerned was that the Middle Eastern countries, from Saudi Arabia to Kuwait to Iraq, Iran, they wanted them to not be under Soviet influence because it was cash money.
Okay.
And that's why, if you remember, or if your readers remember, the CIA had encouraged the coup in Iran, and Shah of Iran was murdered. And Iranian people never forgave America for that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why we had a hostage crisis in 1979, if
Mm-hmm.
you remember.
Yeah, sure. Now, so you've really got a good combination of fiction with nonfiction in this book. Let's get into some of the characters. Your main character is Sanjay. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about Sanjay.
Now, Sanjay had originally started in India as an Indian Air Force pilot, and he took part in the 1965 war between India and Pakistan,
Okay, and
where
he's
he
not a
lost
really
his
nice
brother, who was also in Air Force.
he's not a great guy, is he? He's not a really nice guy.
He's not, but the reason he's not nice guy is by his choice because
Mhm.
he became cynical and wanted to take personal revenge against Pakistan for number one loss of his brother, and
Ah,
also we had a prime minister, Mr. Shastri, who was who died in Tashkent under Soviet Union, where he had gone for a meeting with Russia's president. Well, Russia did not have a president at the time, but
mhm.
the secretary and Pakistan's field marshal. And Mr. Shastri, Prime Minister Shastri, had a heart attack and he died.
Oh, wow.
And there were rumors that the Soviet Union was behind that. But that was the reason the hero, or anti-hero, really, we cannot call him a hero, because, like you said, he's not a very nice guy.
Right. Now
And
he's got the enemy against him is Noor. Is that right? He's an agent for Pakistan.
right.
Right. Let's talk about Noor.
Well, she was ISI's agent,
Uh-huh.
Pakistan's intelligence agency, inter-services intelligence, and her task was to check on this guy Sanjay,
Mhm.
who was rumored to have taken part in President Zia of Pakistan's tragic accident, a
Mhm.
plane crash where Zia was killed, with American ambassador was killed in that plane. So
Mhm.
there were a lot of rumors that either Mossad was involved or India's ISI was involved, And even now, no historian can say who did, but it was an accident, so-called accident, and there is still a mystery. Anyway, so her job was to check on this guy because he was working as an undercover. His job was as an engineer, which he is an engineer, and was supplying information to India's agency. But he had some weaknesses. He was a gambler.
Yeah.
He's a womanizer and also sort of ruthless, meaning that he was so patriotic that that was his main goal, and everything else was okay.
Doesn't that make him kind of vulnerable for Noor?
Yes, and she knew it very well.
Yeah.
She knew his weaknesses, and she was strikingly good looking. In fact, in Pakistan, there were no beauty pageant, otherwise she could have been Miss Pakistan for 2-3 years in a row.
Okay.
But she was a widow, and her husband had committed suicide because her husband was a prisoner of war in India, where India had captured almost 95,000 Pakistani soldiers during the 1970 war with Pakistan. That war actually created what we now call Bangladesh because Pakistan lost heavily and had to give up the second half of the country.
Oh, wow.
So both characters had good reasons to have personal vendetta and duty and everything more than just getting paid as spies. So this is where the book starts, where in spring of 1990, according to Mr. Hirsch, India had given a 96-hour ultimatum to Pakistan because Pakistan was sponsoring terrorists in the Kashmir area. And there were weekly and daily conflicts between both countries. In fact, people will be surprised to know that every morning there was a line, 6 feet from that line, both countries' soldiers were holding rifles against each other.
Oh, wow.
And 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 soldiers on each side were killed every week.
Oh.
So what had happened that the United Nations then finally established a line called LOC, line of control, where neither country was supposed to cross it, even though they were crossing every day.
Yeah.
Because the volunteers of United Nations did not have any authority. Even now, when you see United Nations peacekeeping force in Africa and everywhere else, they are not given any authority or even weapons. They are just there to keep political so-called peace between conflicting, warring parties.
Wow. Dinkar, let me ask you this.
This is where the book starts.
Okay.
And the reason President H.W. Bush was concerned is because there was a rumor that the help Pakistan was getting from Republican administrations, starting from going back to Nixon and Bush and Reagan and Bush, was being used by Pakistan to develop nuclear weapons. India was already an established nuclear power, member of a club. At that time, there were only 6 countries. They had nuclear capabilities: America, China, Russia, France, Britain, and India.
Okay.
Now the club has gone to, about 9 members or 10.
Wow.
But at that time, Bush did not have any issue with India because, number one, it was a democratic country, and India historically was always known to be a peaceful country.
Mm-hmm.
But Bush's concern was Pakistan, because Pakistan had more than 15 governments in 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was ruled by mostly generals, and they were trigger happy people, particularly because they had lost half of its country to India,
Mm.
you know,
Well,
and
let me
Bangladesh was.
let me ask you this. Let me jump in. What do you want people to take away from this book? What do you want them to feel or think when they read this book? Do you want them to take action on anything?
Well, uh, considering what is going on uh, even now, that uh, rich and powerful corporations, you know, have influence over people's daily lives, but the uh, powerful countries, okay, they want to keep a control not only on the oil production, economy, and control of the people as long as they can keep it.
Uh-huh.
However, when these things happen, China was not even an actor on the stage. It was always Russia.
Right.
China has entered it very late, and now the race is between United States and China, and Russia is taking the back seat because
Mm-hmm.
China is providing whatever their goal was, and you know, Russia has actually economically become almost like a third world country. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
anything except they are selling gas, natural
Yeah.
gas, and oil. So uh, now, what people feel every day we watch TV and see China's influence. Even today, it was like China might strike uh, on Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because is China still considers Taiwan as part of China,
Right.
and for some reason, rightfully or wrongfully, Mr. Biden, President Biden, is considered a peace-loving but also kind of a timid president.
Right.
So people
Right.
have concern about what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there is so much misinformation going on both
Yeah.
sides. When I say both sides,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
between liberals and conservatives,
Sure.
and people really don't know who to believe.
No, it's true. So the one thing
Your
that I
readers,
noticed, yeah, the one thing I noticed about your book is that making a profit is not your number one goal. What is your number
no,
one goal with this book?
my number one goal is to make people aware that be careful whatever you read or watch on television. Everybody has an agenda, and you make your own decision.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have this kind of
Mm.
situation, you have to be concerned as a society that don't let the powerful corporations and media outlets and even Facebook and Google and
Mm-hmm.
sway your opinion one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a
That's
very
my
good
concern,
point.
and I have been watching this and cannot even believe you watch MSNBC and you
Mm-hmm.
hear something in the morning, and you watch the Fox channel, you see the 180 degrees different on the same
Yeah.
issue,
Yep. Yep. It's very
and they have
true.
their own agenda.
Yeah.
So what they are doing is using the scare tactics,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And I'm not being trying to be political, but if you watch Fox News, the guy in the evening says, "Oh, tens of thousands of Americans are left in Afghanistan by Biden." The reality was 100 or less than 200 soldiers.
Mm.
So then people wonder that what is this guy talking about,
Yeah.
right?
You lose credibility. Sure.
Yeah. And what he was
Yeah.
talking about was that yes, there were that many Americans, but they had dual citizenship. So they
Ah.
were Afghans, but given American citizenship also. So
Mm-hmm.
Biden cannot even say with straight face that, well, they are not Americans because they were not born here. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
So that's
definitely.
not a defense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people don't know that. And
Yeah.
I'm not putting anybody down, but if you are in Nebraska or Louisiana or Ohio watching this news, you scratch your head that who to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Dinkar, we're coming to the end of the interview here, but I want to know, how can people get a hold of your book and maybe get a hold of you if they have questions they want to find out more?
Okay. First of all, I have a website. My personal website says dinkarpujarabooks.com.
Okay.
And then they can order in Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
Kindle, or order demand on print, or also on the site for Barnes and Noble.
Okay. Or
If,
Writers Republic.
yes, of course, they
Mm-hmm.
have their own
Mm-hmm.
website, which is printed in
Yes.
my.
Okay.
And the hardcover is $14. I mean $16.
Mm-hmm.
Paperback is $13, and ebook is only $4,
Wow. That's a
where
good
you can
deal.
download, on Kindle and go through that.
Mm-hmm.
However, I should warn the readers that because the way central characters are, uh, it crosses a boundary. Sometimes it's called, decency, or a normal human being would not do that. Or
It's graphic. Yes.
yes,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
okay, it's
Yeah.
not quite explicit,
Right.
but if somebody decides to make a show or movie, that would be an R-rated movie.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. That's good to know. Dinkar, we've got to wrap up here, but it was such a joy to talk to you. What a wealth of information.
Thank you, and
Information just
I want to
so good.
tell the readers and you that I did not write this to make profit.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to convey the message. Okay, I'm not rich, but I'm doing okay without profit from this book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my
Mm-hmm.
intention is to send the message that what is going on and what actually happened, and all those things. However, I still don't give out my copy of my book free to anybody, because I noticed that when somebody gets something for free, by definition it loses the value. So
Sure.
if you have
Absolutely.
paid only even $4 or $5, okay,
You're still
it's like an
invested. Yeah.
like airport or book on your flight, that you will go through that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and I
Dinkar,
really
thank
appreciate
you.
your help, Suzanne,
Absolutely. It
and
was a
I hope
pleasure.
readers. I'm almost sure, not almost, I'm 100% sure that they will enjoy it, and see that the hero is not like James Bond. Okay, the hero is exactly opposite. Although he does all these heroic things, both of them, hero and heroine, they never carry a gun.
Yeah.
Remember, we used to have a show called Columbo, where the detective Columbo, Lieutenant Columbo,
Columbo,
never
yes.
carried a gun.
One of my favorites. Yes.
My favorites too.
Yeah.
So these
Yeah.
people use their brain, their charm, their looks,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever the cunning things they have, and don't use guns.
You
That
underestimate
doesn't mean they are
them.
innocent.
Right. Yes, I hear you. Dinkar, we've got to go, but it was a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much, and we look forward to maybe speaking to you again sometime in the future.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. You have
Thank
been
you.
very kind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Have a great day. Bye bye.